No bills have been introduced. The House comes to questions for oral answer. Question number 1 in the name of the Honourable Annette King.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question's to the Prime Minister. Does he stand by all his statements?
Right Honourable Prime
Speaker,
Minister.
yes.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, the Honourable Annette King.
Does he stand by his statement that, quote, "We'll be coming back over the next weeks and months with concrete policy across a range of portfolios. If we don't come up with any policy solutions, then I'll live and die by that criticism," made in his State of the Nation speech, January 2007, in light of the fact UNICEF have said today that the government's policies are, quote, "doing little to protect our most vulnerable citizens from poverty and failure"?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, yes, and I would note a number of things about the UNICEF report. Probably the most important of them is they show the importance of economic growth. Because the countries actually that have been doing better in terms of improving child poverty are those ones that had a strong economy, and those that have been doing particularly poorly and had big increases in child poverty are countries that have had a big recession. Well, actually, interestingly enough, that's the point, isn't it, with Australia, is that they didn't go into recession and they did manage to provide more support. And I think that's exactly the reason why New Zealanders so roundly rejected Labour's proposition, because they knew it would be bad for the economy and bad for child poverty.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker. In light of that...
Supplementary question, the Honourable Annette King.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In light of that answer then, does he realise Australia, which did not go into recession, as the Prime Minister said, still prioritised children and low-income earners during the global financial crisis, while New Zealand, which did go into recession, instead favoured the wealthy with tax cuts?
Mr Speaker,
right Honourable Prime Minister.
What is clear is the member's got amnesia. We were in recession before National even became, that is the point, you just said it, before you even came to government. Secondly, I remember going through an election campaign with one of the Labor leaders, I don't know, they've had quite a few of them, but I remember when that particular Labor leader criticising this side of the House for borrowing money to support the most vulnerable children in New Zealand. And that's another reason why they got hammered.
Question, Mr Speaker.
Order. Order. Supplementary question,
Calm
the
down,
Honourable
Jerry.
Annette King.
Why did the government prioritise tax cuts at the height of the global financial crisis, which has given the Prime Minister himself an extra $385 a week, over helping those who were living in the greatest hardship?
Mr.
Right
Speaker,
Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, again, the member has amnesia because she forgets that in 2009, despite actually the commitment on the campaign trail for tax cuts, the government actually didn't implement that program. It did so in 2010. It did so in 2010. It did so in a way that was distributionally neutral, as the Treasury will tell you. Well, interestingly enough, Mr. Speaker, one of the very significant changes as part of that program was, one of the very important parts of that program was actually the changes made in relation to depreciation on rental properties. And what that saw was the Crown's revenue rising by the order of about $600 to $700 million. The other thing that was remarkable about that was, not only did we know that policy, we could explain it. That's quite different to the capital gains tax that Mr Cunliffe was proposing.
Speaker.
Supplementary question, the Honourable Annette King.
Can the Minister please provide today 3 concrete policies that will reduce child poverty and put food on the table of families that are in severe hardship, including working families, in the next 3 years of his government?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, well, more work and a stronger economy, and that'll be certainly supported by the employment law changes that are going through at the moment and changes to the RMA, and I hope the members support those. Oh, that's right. You don't need good planning legislation. Number two, Mr. Speaker, the work we're doing around social housing and making sure that families will have housing to live in. And Mr. Speaker, number three, although I'm more than happy to take an extension of time, if the member wants me to name 10, I'm more than happy to do it, but number three would just be free doctors' visits for under 13s. Again, the very reason why we're back in government and Labor got hammered.
Not one of them puts food on the table.
Supplementary question, Honourable Annette.
What is more important to the government today? Announcing $26 million to change the flag, or setting some real measures to reduce child poverty that actually puts money in their pocket so they can buy the food they need?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
If the member is claiming, as she seems to be, that the setting of a target is what's going to change the position for young New Zealanders that are in poverty, then that's what's so terribly wrong with the Labor Party. They continue to think that just setting a target, setting up a new committee, having some new little way of looking at things, no, you've had your chance. No, you've had your chance.
Order,
See ya.
Order. Order. Well, I hope I'm not, but is that a point of order? Then order. It is a point of order, and it will be heard in silence.
Mr. Speaker, my question, what was more important to the government, whether it was the $26 million on change the flag or concrete measures, and then the Prime Minister talked about me talking about... Order. Invite the member to reflect on a question. It was, is it more important to the flag or developing some real measures? And the Prime Minister in his answer was concentrating on that part of the question. Order. May not have. Question number 2, Andrew Bailey.